huge appreciation and thank you from the name of the community for keeping it open. And it's really, 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 really hard to be consistent and show up. And you and the community does it each week for 3 years now. I think you missed 2 sessions or 1 session only or something like that in 150 weeks or something like that. So let's talk about motivation around keeping up and keeping it open. We see so many haters in the space, so many negative voices, so many people saying that, hey, monetize, hey, don't do it, hey, this is bad, hey, something. So I wonder, what is your why?
Why do I give it all away?
And why do you keep on doing it?
I've been building almost my entire life. When I was 8, I got a computer, a Tandy, and my parents spent all their money on the computer and to buy me software. Back then, my options were limited in terms of software without money, and I discovered something called shareware. This was in the mid '80s, and in order to get software in 1987, your options were basically to buy it or to share it. And so in order to share software in 1987 required that I had to create something in order to get something, which was the basis of shareware. And so I started with a GW Basic application that basically allowed you, for lack of a better term, to hack other people. And this was when I was 10. So I shared that, and rather quickly that became a thing in my software. Nobody knows you're a cat when you're online, but back in 1987, no one knew you were a 9-year-old, and that was my sort of introduction to this idea of a kind of altruism in the creation and distribution of software. So quite quickly, I became known, even though I was 10, in that world. And I hooked up with different companies and started sharing the opportunities and sort of presented themselves. And I was able to ride these various waves. The first wave was basically online. This was AOL, and then that became the internet and so on and so forth. So I was born at the right moment to kind of ride multiple waves. My first real big break, other than being the original designer of Napster, which we don't really talk about, was cloud computing. So this is a template that I understand. So in the early days of cloud computing, I had to advocate. And I heard the same things. Cloud's never going to be a thing, right? No one's going to outsource their infrastructure. It's not going to happen. And the weird thing about my brain, when people tell me it's not possible and it's not going to work, it almost inspires me to say, I'm going to show you that it is going to work. Anyway, long story short, cloud became a thing. Then I built the company, sold it, blah, blah, blah. And then after you sell your business, what they don't tell you is you lose your sort of inspiration for like what you want to build. But during that sort of period where I was like lost, what kept me grounded was the open source community. I always had this community of sort of people who were like-minded. So fast forward 25 years or whatever it was to the AI age, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, this is going to be a thing, right? And then I met people like Rob and Nick and Manjweep and Bensa and Antoaneta, and this great community that supports us. So the more I give, almost like the better I felt. Those bad days where you wake up and you're not like inspired to do anything. I get a call from Mark, and Mark be like, I just built the craziest thing ever, and like, all right. Right, and it was like the ultimate pick me up. Like this weird sort of inspiration that I get from others. I don't know. That's random thoughts in my brain.
What would you say to the people who are afraid of being replaced? Right, like we have Antoaneta coming from the bio field where. Well, AI just won a Nobel Prize a couple of months ago. Doctors fearing being replaced. Or Rob, you are a recovering artist? Or how should you label yourself? Like now we have diffusion models doing like videos, robots painting and all that. So who wants to take the first stab at it on the fear aspect, if there is any?
I can start. I think some aspects of the fear are totally real because we see that certain tasks are automated. There's no way to sugarcoat it, right? But then what happens is that we invent things that we didn't even think are going to happen, right? And that it's just like a spark that grows into a fire. And so you can imagine new applications and you can actually build it the way, I was inspired by this and I didn't know I can do it and I started doing it. And so, and you brought somebody, I think you mentioned, or somebody else, radiologist, right? Maybe a few years back, Hinton said, "Oh, yeah, there's not going to be a radiologist." Well, guess what? Then now the numbers are much higher than before because it's actually, I think actually it's the decision making, it's the thinking, it's the human aspects as well that are not going to be replaced. We can automate something that we know what it is, but we don't know what it could be, like the bigger picture. And so, I think with every technological, development, people think, oh, we only need the faster horses, but then you don't need the faster horse, you need the car, and then you need, and then the applications become known, right? With time, we can't imagine in the beginning. At the same time, I have two boys in the early 20s, and they haven't had a real job yet, full-time job. They do internships and whatnot. So that whole generation is actually spooked. And very recently, I think there was a commencement address by the Google X CEO, and he was booed on campus because young people, and they're actively trying to sabotage. Like 40% of the young people are trying to, put the wrong data in the AI or something else to say, oh, it's not working because they're afraid there's no options for them. There is no future. But at the same time, I'm in the optimist camp. I think we're going to see it's just incremental what we can see. Like Reuven can see 10 years, 20 years into the future. Not everybody can, right? And I think with time, this layers, it's like a ripple effect. We're going to see more and more applications, but it happens with time. So I think the future is bright, but the fear, I think the next maybe 10 years, this gap in between the abundance, which I think is going to happen with time, with the robots and intelligence. And today, when people are really afraid, that those 10 years or so, I don't know how many, is going to be it's going to be shaky.
How does one survive that 10 years?
With imagination.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Completely agree, Antoaneta. I think the urgency is real, and the fear and the pushback and the anger, especially coming out of youth. I mean, I can't imagine right now trying to decide what programs to go into, what to select a major in this environment when the emergence of publicly available to large language models in this space to today is still less time than it takes to get a degree. And look at the pace of change already. So displacement is, in my opinion, real. It's coming. It's the potential to disrupt entire industries. The appetite to replace a single job category or job type, it's measured in billions of dollars. And so a startup that can perfectly encapsulate a single job type and automate it in its entirety is a multi-billion-dollar company. So every single job type across the spectrum of human civilization has a great big target on it as far as artificial intelligence is concerned. And I don't think there's any, we can't hedge that the contemporary definition of artificial general intelligence is to be able to operate at a level of being able to perform most commercially viable jobs better than most humans. So that's the operating definition of AGI that everybody is streaming towards. So I completely sympathize and think that the journey really has to include grassroots awareness of what the tools are really capable of, where they really fall, and how quickly they are truly emerging, and that if there is a confusion or a lack of awareness at the community level about what these tools are now capable of and quickly becoming capable of, then they will just only be adopted and used by very large entities, and that's not in broader society's interests. So that's what keeps me engaged.
What about you, Rob? Everybody says that coding is dead. At the same time, they say that engineering is not coding. And at the same time, we see engineering orchestrators building big systems. What would you say to the engineers in the room? Is there a future, and how does that future look like?
I think Dragan mentioned it in his presentation, the emergence of the democratization of development. And what we're seeing, like a project, these random projects getting, suddenly millions of downloads in an afternoon. GitHub is the new social network, right? At least for the types of work that we're doing. And suddenly there's the line between creation and distribution is blurred to a point where anyone with a good idea can go out there, build it, share it, and be well known for it almost instantaneously. You're looking at, one guy that's put out 50 million lines of code, and comfortably on a bad week can do millions of downloads with a small team of agentic agents doing most of the work. That's incredible to me. So to the point of where does this all go? And this is a conversation Finn and I had earlier today, and his older brother is going off to university in about a year. What are they going to do? And and in the sort of, sorry Finn, putting you on the spot here, but when he and his brother are very different. His brother is much more sort of creative in sort of how he looks at the world. He's got a more of an artistic flair, not a programmer. And my guidance for him is the opposite of what I would have said 10 years ago. I'm telling him to follow his passion. Follow the things that inspire him to get up and do. We're in a world suddenly where you can create pretty much anything you want if you have the ideas and the ability to act on those ideas. Now, so that for him, that likely doesn't mean going into computer science. But for someone like Finn, who we build and we create and he has inspired me to create a lot of the things like the Cognitum platform itself. His guide is similar. Follow your passion, which probably leads him to more computer science related work. So back to Dragan for a moment. The idea of Jevons paradox, this idea that there's more opportunity is going to create more opportunity. And I think the takeaway from all this, we're now 1 degree of separation from everyone else in our community. So if you have an idea or an opportunity or you want to start something and you're not sure where or how to do it, you've got all these people around you that can support you in your own little crazy world. I don't know.
And I've experienced that a lot because I was so shy. I was a fly on the wall for probably the first year. No one knew I was there, but I was absorbing, I was learning. And then I started reaching out to people, and everybody is so responsive and wants to help. This is incredible. And then from an idea in your head, which my head is buzzing all the time, but I was super frustrated because I felt I'm handcuffed because I'm not a developer. And so in the olden times, you have a team and data scientists and developers, and it takes 2 years to do something. But I don't want 2 years. I want to do it in 2 days. And so this community actually helps you, everything that is in your head can become real. It's just incredible. And thank you to everybody, because a lot of people have helped me through this journey. And not the least of it is to not feel have this imposter syndrome all the time. Right? Because you think, but at the same time, everybody starts someplace and you have to learn. And then you only need to think that other people learn as well, and they stumble and they, fall and they pick themselves up and continue. And those are the people that are going to succeed. You were asking what it would take. I think imagination is one factor, but the other one is mindset. I can do something and I'm going to figure out how to do it. You can reinvent yourself all the time, no matter whether you're 5 or whatever, 500 one day.
Rob, anything to add?
What's that?
Anything to add from your side?
Just that if we envision that innovation outpaces displacement, then that is possible only with mutual sharing and education as we learn collectively. Like, it will be individual innovations en masse that will give us the opportunity to innovate more quickly. That's why after everything, I'm still optimistic because it's still a human civilization.
Let's talk about the future then, in a more positive sense. I have a tendency of taking things dark, so I'll try to avoid that right now. I heard from my running coach a couple of years ago while I was still running marathons is that it's not the distance, it's the speed that kills. And the speed of innovation and speed of change is neck-breaking right now, and it always was in this space. And related to that, I heard from Boris Cherny, the creator of Cloud Code, that the solution to this is to build for 6 months from now. So I wonder, in your individual fields, what are the not so obvious things that you think everybody should be aware of? Because those are the things that will be extremely relevant 6 months from now. Who wants to go first?
I just want to say that Reuven actually does it. He doesn't talk about it, but he actually does it. And so he's consistently 6 to 9 months ahead of all the frontier labs. So it's not talking, it's doing.
My biggest, I guess, what I'm seeing, at least, and to Antoaneta's point, you build the future. You don't predict it. There's two groups of people. Those that are saying that this will be the future, and there's a few like Asanov that were amazing at predicting, but he never built anything. And he obviously a major inspiration to the things that we're building. So for me, the next major sort of step is away from the idea of a monolith. A lot of the AI we see today is based on the concepts of throwing huge amounts of electricity and computational power to answer one question by attempting to answer all the questions to get the most likely answer. It's inefficient, and it essentially limits the ability of AI to those who can afford to spend and build the massive data centers, afford $100,000 GPUs and so on. So when you look at the things that I'm building, in the Antoaneta's example of the Cognitum system, where I'm using this concept of contrastive AI. So if you think of a spectrum of AI, right now we're in the generative phase. Generative AI, again, uses dense multiplex math, answers everything for one thing, it's probabilistic. And the problem with probabilism in these systems is it's not necessarily the answer, it's just the most likely answer to the problem. So that leads to things like hallucinations and other problems. So the approach that I've taken sort of flips it. It says, I'm going to look at the contrast of something. I'm going to look at the empty space, the null value, the zero. And over the last, 80 years of tech, we've looked at the one, in the zero and the one, and said, what's the answer? What is the thing? And that's driven us to where we are today. In the application, and if you look beneath the covers of the things I'm building, I'm using a combination of vector mathematics in the form of a hyperbolic space. And in that, I'm applying a causal loop. And it sounds like I'm insane. But the causal loop says, what's happening. So these systems are learning in correlation to the world around us. So rather than pre-training something that says, give it all the information that can possibly feed it, stolen from the internet and various sources, and then be done, I'm saying, give it a kind of evolutionary starting point, give it the information that it needs to get going, but assume the system can adapt and learn and understand based on what it doesn't need to see. So think of this as an example. If I want to look at 8 billion people, and I want to determine out of those 8 billion people who is doing financial crime. Now, my options in a sort of traditional AI world would be to train a model on all those 8 billion people and try to look for patterns within those 8 billion people. Now, if I want to monitor, and I'm not suggesting we monitor 8 billion people, but let's say we did monitor 8 billion people, and I'm going to say I'm going to do the world's most efficient AI, and it's going to be $1 a month to look at 8 billion people. That's going to cost me $8 billion a month times 12. It's not likely and it's inefficient. So the only solution to that problem is one of two things that happen. One, I'm not going to look at 8 billion people. I'm going to look at some subset and think that there's statistical relevance between those, which means I'm generalizing everyone and trying to get back to that one person that's doing the financial crime, which isn't fair. The other approach is to look at the void. The void says most things have a baseline or coherence. Coherence patterns, things that are sometimes referred to as the minimum cut in a network or a graph structure, allows me to say most things are the same. Most of my heartbeats are going to be the same. Occasionally, something changes. Now, when that thing changes, that sort of goes into the sort of negative space, that void, and then I can then look at those changes fairly quickly. So rather than looking at everything, I'm looking at nothing until the changes kind of go into that negative space. Now, the benefit to that approach is null or zero values don't take any space. There's nothing to store, and I can more quickly adapt to changes in real time. So the sort of confluence of negative space, vector mathematics, graph overlays, and attention applied to that provides a hyper-efficient form of AI capable of adapting, understanding, and more importantly, being grounded based on mathematics versus some weird form of probabilism that is based on GPUs. It's cheap, it's efficient. When I say efficient, 1,000,000 times less power than traditional GPUs, and most importantly, it's sovereign. That means I don't need to go to the cloud to answer all my problems. I need a cheap little $200 box I plug in that knows the difference between when I'm good and when I'm bad, when I'm healthy and when I'm sick, when I fall in and I can't get up.
Rob, what should people prepare 6 months from now? What do you see today building for the future?
I was just going to say that exactly what Reuven's laying out.
What he said.
Yeah, because, I mean, all of these vectors point towards local. They point towards very inexpensive. They point towards a break in the dependence. And sovereign data is important, I mean, wonderfully important at the individual level. Because now we can begin to envision powerful, ubiquitous intelligence without breaking the covenant that we have had to so far of handing over our personal data. So it gives a path to personal privacy, of reclaiming data. I'm a big proponent of putting data on the cap table. I think it's the only contribution that hasn't been recognized as a fundamental contribution to the achievement of artificial intelligence. You know, capital are getting their return, and IP and science is being recognized on the cap table, but we all contributed everything, all of our data, and none of that is recognized on the cap table. And I think that's a prospective path for global participation in the revenue streams that emerge from this creativity as we continue to pursue this, potential that comes from this new accelerated innovation.
One last question after we'll open up to the crowd. You mentioned creativity, and I hear from a lot of engineers, coders, not liking coding with AI because they like the coding part, because coding is an art and it takes creativity. So I just wonder, what are your, as an artist, and you guys as well, guys and gals, about the creativity piece when using a technology that by default converges to the mean? And how do you balance that both in art as classical art and whatever creative venue you're exploring in your work or free time?
Well, specifically in the arts, I thought I was retired, and and I had opened up a sculpting studio and was happily sculpting with clay and casting and all that kind of stuff until I met Reuven. And that is, boy, that's why I don't buy into anywhere near the idea that without labor we are lost for purpose, because in purpose are all of our relationships, all of our love, all of the music, all of our relationships with food and each other and community. And there is plenty of purpose beyond the pursuit of labor. And art, I think, is one of those beautiful things that gives you a self-engagement and satisfaction that is just simply not for commercial purpose. And so there is a harbor for it. I can't speak to folks who are looking at if the art of coding and the art of producing that artifact through the traditional method, there comes a point where you have to step away from that as a commercial pursuit And, that's what graphic designers have had to face in the very early stage, is that when they're designing specifically for a commercial pursuit, that will be outcompeted. Because, generative AI is, for the capitalism, it is just by and large, it's good enough and dirt cheap, which is going to win every time. So art is just for us.
Rob, my favorite socialist. The question is, do we work to live or work or live to work? And I don't know if that dichotomy is what we need to work around, right? And that's why I didn't do particularly well at Microsoft and some of the larger companies. I create because I can. Code for me is an expression. It's an expression of the things I want to create for this world. And I don't create it because I want to sell it. I create it because it needs to be created. So I see code as just another level of expression. Back in the 90s, when I was, occasionally DJing in for EDM, that was the way I expressed myself at 4 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday night or whatever. And it was a way that I could get my message out there through sound and music. And I don't make a distinction of the code that I put out there or the music or whatever, or a visual. It's just a way that I can express myself. So to some of your points, now, I just don't feel like I need to do that to make some random billionaire somewhere richer, right? For me, the richness comes in seeing Antoaneta up here presenting and expressing herself, and that just makes me feel great to see people building on my stuff. That's, maybe if I spent more time commercializing it, I'd be a billionaire and I could have an impact because I was a billionaire or something. But I'm pretty sure if I was a billionaire, I'd probably be really unhappy. And to be honest, I love whatever it is that I'm doing right now. I look forward to getting up in the morning, seeing what my agents built. Avoid some of the haters. I could deal with a little bit less of that, but the supporters offset the haters. So life's good.
What can I say more? Creativity is actually one of my favorite words and feelings, and I don't think it's, proprietary to developers or artists or ballet dancers or whatever. We're all creators. We just have different ways of expressing it. And what attracted me to this community from the get-go is that if you have an idea which is kind of captured in your skull, you can express it. And so I think with time, code, I'm not a coder, but I can build stuff today, and I'm sure next year is going to be easier. And even Boris Cherny said that within 3 years, there's not going to be code anymore because we can, assemble the Lego blocks and we can build stuff that is in our head. So I think that no matter what your ambitions are, we will be able to materialize these things from an idea in your head. And I think, we have this large language models and harnesses and videos and whatnot, and the robots soon are going to do stuff. So I'm a techno-optimist. I think eventually we're going to be freed up from all the stuff we don't want to do, and we're going to be able to dedicate ourselves to things that we love, and we're going to figure out a way how to express ourselves. And everybody's an artist.
Let's just see how does the redistribution of power happen. But let's not take it dark and instead open it up to the community. So any questions?
Thank you. This question is for Reuven. So you make it sound like a piece of cake with the high downloads and the number of stars. If you can choose your top 3 consistency of all the open source that you have launched, what would you say the top 3 reasons are?
Consistency in what I create or why I create?
Anything that you believe that it happens, the same reason for all the projects, that you see something that it happens for all the projects, the top 3.
Well, I can speak to success. And out of the hundreds, probably thousands of projects, most sort of just kind of withered and went nowhere. But out of those, I discovered somehow or other that they were the next big thing. The big first one was Claude Flow back I guess it's been a year, which is crazy. And that blew up really quick. And, by that point, I'd already been doing it for 3 years, right? And it was a culmination of all these things that I've learned and built. And as soon as I saw the fact that I could use, the sort of unlimited account of Claude Code and had no real limits to how much I could consume at that point. In the early days of Claude Code, there was no limit, right? You could literally just throw as much as you wanted. And suddenly I went from, the potential of having a swarm, if you will, that would cost me thousands of dollars a day to $200 a month. So the first thing I did was create a swarm that allowed me to take all these crazy ideas that I was building, but were prohibitively expensive. And suddenly I was able to create at a scale that was just unfathomable. So I think some people call it a Cambrian explosion or something like that. And that led to a whole variety of other of projects that kind of blew up. But what's interesting when you look at my projects, there's like this unbroken chain of one thing led to the next. And if you dig deep enough, you'll see there's an interconnected relationship of everything I've built over the last several years. You see spec-driven development, which is almost 3.5 years old now. You see this kind of modular approach because for a long time, the apps that we're building, I suffered from this this dilemma where it said the AI said it was great and perfect, yet it was full of bugs. And after a while, you just don't want to be people pointing out all your bugs. So then that required me to create scaffolding, or I guess what Rob calls a harness, that would allow me to create structures around that. Of course, I open source that. And then next thing you know, I'm building these random tools that again are kind of solving problems in ways that no one thought to solve. Like, I think the most interesting part of what I'm building right now is this idea of the infusion of AI into the real world, right? Because nothing against the dashboards, they're cool, but the idea that you can sort of hack reality, I know it sounds like a crazy thing, is just astounding to me. I can see this area. Like, if I told you 3 years ago that I could basically see and hack kind of wireless networks, like not just wireless networks, but the wireless RF that sits around us, you would have thought I was a crazy guy with a tinfoil hat saying 5G secretly tracks us. But take that a step further. Let's go way back for a moment. There's been this idea, and Manjup and I just were discussing this last week, of the sort of hidden world around us, like crystals, for example. So crystals have this kind of vibration, right? And the vibration you can sort of invoke by sending them signals and sound waves and other things, and certain crystals will glow, for example. Or turns out there's these vibrations that exist within you as a human that you can pick up on. Some people refer to that potentially as a soul, right? But before recently, like in the last few months, that was this thing we sort of thought was there but couldn't really prove. All of a sudden, we've got these technologies that says, actually, each individual has a unique electrical biosignature that you can pick up on using Wi-Fi signals that creates a kind of fingerprint of sorts that's unique to you and your unique chemistry and electromagnetic signatures. Now, that's all real. And it was discovered by a random dude just fooling around on a live cast, right? Those are the things that are so amazing to me right now. I don't know. I'm going totally off in a deep end here, but the takeaway is anything is possible if you ask the right questions and can put the pieces together. And you don't need to be a PhD like Antoaneta, but you can be. And it means it's been democratized to a point where someone that's just inquisitive enough can solve the craziest problems known to man, humankind. I don't know.
So it's important to ask the right questions. Who's next with the right question?
I'll ask a question about where you see AI going. So we see these exponentially improving models, state-of-the-art models, and then very quickly open source models. Now the time frame to get to almost equivalence in capability of an open source is shortening and shortening and shortening. So when are these models going to be good enough to do all these crazy things that we're doing and be able to run on local devices? Well, that a year?
Aren't they right now?
Yeah. I mean,
well, it depends how you measure it. So there's two schools, right? Let's just say the LLM school, right? And the big breakthrough was this idea of reasoning, and what I was describing earlier as a kind of recursive loop. So when you look at reasoning within an LLM model, it wasn't that the models have changed dramatically over the last 3 years. What's changed is the ability for the model itself to have an introspection. The model to question its own identity, its own sort of output, and then refine that based on a kind of temporal loop. Longer it thinks, the better and more it sort of recursively gets more intelligent. Now, at some point, we're going to reach a plateau. Whether that's now or in 5 or 10 years, who knows? But at some reason that you're going to take that as far as it can go, and that what that likely means is it gets to the right optimal answer, and that is what it is. Now, certain things are going to get to that right optimal answer more quickly. Certain problems are more inherently suited for that kind of interpretation. Then there's a space outside of like what we know, right? This is the area of discovery. This is that unseen world that exists that we were never able to actually interpret or understand. What LLMs, for me, do is provides a kind of cognitive, I don't even know what to describe it, like the ability to describe things that are beyond my comprehension, right? And that. Yeah, so it's like a supplement to my mind. It doesn't need it, and the most powerful parts of AI is the fact that it can adjust to the way that I see the world and the way I understand the world, and then it can interpret that in more interesting ways. Now imagine when everyone has the ability to do that at an optimal level. Maybe we'll call it AGI. I don't know, but I don't. I'm ranting.
So I'm going to ask a more specific question about that. When are we, because already Root Vector can run on almost nothing. So when are we going to get an LLM that works with Root Vector well enough that you don't need to use one of these large LLMs that have to run on big cloud systems?
I'd say soon. So
Are you working on it?
I'm particularly lucky. I've got some really good benefactors. And I've taken a rather unusual route where most AI companies in the space go to the Silicon Valley and try to raise crazy amounts of money. I've taken a more community open approach, which gets, depending on which side of this fence you're on, people who think I'm crazy or whatever. But that there is a purpose. And for me, the purpose is the idea that we can create this kind of ambient intelligence, the ability to infuse those things into everyday objects at super low power. And what we're seeing over the next few years is a kind of take away the LLM stuff and GPUs, and even the latest announcement from NVIDIA is a perfect example. They're coming out with a compute-centric version of AI that'll run on low power, on CPU-centric architectures. So they're even coming around to the idea. So let's assume that is the future for a moment. GPUs they'll have their place. But most AI doesn't need that GPU-centric approach. It just needs enough to know to reason upon itself, as we saw earlier, to understand its own causal effect, good, bad, and otherwise. And that doesn't require a monolith sort of approach. It requires essentially a vector store and a graph. Once you've got that, you can infuse that in pretty much anything that'll run on a AA battery. Right? It just needs to be able to understand the nuance of what's changed, why it's important, and how that relates to whatever baseline it's monitoring. Whether that's your heartbeat or a stock makes no difference. The structure is the same. So at that point, you've got this kind of ambient intelligence that can be infused into the world around us and making our lives and our systems and our processes better and more efficient. That changes, in my opinion, everything, because everything that has any source of electricity, even ambient electricity, becomes a source of intelligence. So think of like a calculator that's as smart as Opus 4.8.
We are chasing like brute force intelligence, while maybe not every task in humanity requires PhD level intelligence. And to that, I want to ask Rob to add a bit around the importance of scaffolding, harnesses, orchestration layers to build intelligence with not so intelligent LLM systems. Do you want to add a few words around that?
Yeah, and I mean, so the work now, and you can pick up on it on teams from a variety of, from every angle, is on the bridge between level 4 and level 5 coding automation. And where that is existing is, and you can see it in the pockets within Rooflow, is the ability to assess code and hypothesize potential improvements, horse race those improvements, harden actual lifting improvements. This is all, the approach of final stages of coding development as it transitions into a background ether, as opposed to an exercise that we have to manually create. And I just want to add that element around the pace of change of intelligence. So Reuven is discovering new ways to apply these ideas, almost in reverse to how the big, large foundation models are being developed. But yet, at the foundation levels, the foundation models, the price of intelligence is dropping by a factor of 40 per year. So what was $100 million 2 years ago is $300,000 last year, and it's $6 grand this year. So, and that will continue as far as we can tell. So the ubiquitous and nature of intelligence at all levels is well underway.
One last question that I'll add to the bio folks. We talk about artificial intelligence while we have human intelligence. How do you see the future from a bio standpoint? Will there be a merger? If the opportunity of merger is there, you personally, would you sign up for it? And just in general, how do you see that close Black Mirror future coming or not coming?
I'm not sure it's going to be Black Mirror. I think it's going to be the opposite, honestly, because we're, for a long time we were stuck for various reasons. We don't have the right data. It's not clean data. We don't have the compute. And now it's all becoming reality, and there's this exponential trends that are actually converging. And so I believe we're going to discover so much stuff faster. Think about, you mentioned the Nobel Prize, right? Whatever, 2 years ago, Demis Hassabis got it. And it was all developers. They didn't know anything about protein folding. They just decided because Demis has a neuroscience degree, and he's always been, very passionate about that. And they started with games, right? And they applied. They said, okay, what is the big problem now that we have proven this can work on games, right? Atari and whatnot. What can we do with real problems? And so because of his background, I think he infected everybody else to try to solve something really big. And all of a sudden, lo and behold, they're solving 50-year-old problem that no one could solve before. And so there's multiple examples of this sort that are coming up. And I think it's just, these trends are converging. And with time, we're like, each of us is going to become a creator. More and more, there's open data sources like Mark Zuckerberg and BioHub and whatnot. They're putting tons of both software and data. And we have, think about your body. We have so many modalities. You have, metabolites. You have, all kinds of blood chemistry. You have all kinds of genomic data, your DNA, your RNA. There is all kinds of data. And there's so many dimensions. And no human being is able to comprehend that or analyze it or find the patterns. With these technologies, it's becoming close, and actually depends more on the question you're asking, like, what do I want to do and what do I want to build versus, how am I limited? And that's why I keep saying imagination and creativity. I think this is gonna, like, when I was little, I was watching this animated series, maybe not recalling perfectly, Baron Munchausen, and that creature, he was in a swamp, and how is he going to get out? He just grabbed himself by the hair and pulled himself up. I think this is what we're going to do. We're going to help ourselves get out of the swamp, right? We have to envision it, and we can do it. So anyway, and Demis Hassabis himself, I think he said that in a few years, we're going to solve all disease, because we have the compute, we have the data, we have the ideas, we have the setup right. I don't know whether it's going to be a few years. I think, diseases are super complicated and there's so many dimensions, but I think we're accelerating and on multiple levels. And so eventually things are going to happen much, much, much faster. And, we're definitely discovering, things that were not thought possible. And, humans we're kind of linear thinkers, right? We're not exponential thinkers. So we can see, a little bit ahead, but we can't see far ahead. And I think what's happening is that we're seeing the signals, how this amplification happens, and it's kind of within reach. That's why, in a way, I'm thinking in 10 years, like we all can dedicate ourselves to our purpose, to our hobbies, to our dreams, right? I think that maybe within 10 years, we're going to be there, honestly.
The future will be bright. Well, thank you. Thank you for creating the space. Thank you for hosting the spaces for innovation. Thank you for the Agentic Foundation. Also, thank you for Tamás and Balázs over there and the ShareTech Foundation for also creating the space and the events over here. Thank you for Create26 for hosting us. Thank you for you all for coming. Your attention is the most valuable thing that you can have. So thank you for giving us your attention and coming. And if you do something tomorrow is, well, follow this guy if you wanna participate in sci-fi episodes. Become a member of the Agentic Foundation, become a member of the Budapest Chapter, and sign up for the next event. See you soon. Until then, stay curious and keep on asking the right questions. Thank you.